Hello friends, welcome. If we've met before, it's great to see you again, and if not, hi, my name is Taylor, and welcome to Taylor's Table Talk, because there is indeed a table here. Today we'll be continuing on with another deep dive of Our Flag Means Death, Season 1, Episode 5, The Best Revenge is Well Dressed, written by John Mahone and directed by Fernando Frias. And of course, these deep dives are coinciding with my rewatch videos where I have been rewatching, reacting, and giving my thoughts and opinions about the show, and then I continue with those thoughts and opinions here. So, here we are. But before we get into it, I do want to address the writer's strike that is happening right now. I have been trying to bring attention to it pretty much in every video that I've been doing so far, and I will continue to do so for as long as this strike goes on. And it doesn't look like it's just going to be a writer's strike for long. We already have actors who have been joining the picket lines, but it now looks like SAG is likely going to join the strike as well. SAG, the Actors Union, did recently approve the strike authorization, so basically that means that if their demands are not met, very much like the writer's strike, they will also be going on strike as well until those demands get met. And in my opinion, these demands are not hard to meet, and I will leave an actual link to both the WGA and SAG's actual list of demands, so you can look into that more, because I know I'm always missing a lot of those big components of what they're asking for, but like in general, they are asking for just better pay, for better benefits, for protection, so on and so forth. But they're easy demands to meet that these big name companies and networks can easily meet. I do just want to remind you to support writers, to support actors, and to just continue to follow along with these strikes, and to just talk about it, whether it's social media, whether it's with friends, talking about it and drawing attention to it. And one of the best ways to show support right now is to talk about it, whether it's on social media or with friends, and putting pressure on these networks to give in to these demands, because again, they're not hard to meet. And now with all that being said, let's dive on in. I nearly forgot to show you, but yeah, no, I still have notes. So we are now at the halfway point of Season 1 with Episode 5, and there being 10 episodes as a whole. Steed and Ed are not only acquainted with each other, but they also are hitting things off pretty well. As for the crew, they are now settling in well with each other, while also, I think, trying to now settle in with the addition of Blackbeard's crew, specifically with Izzy. And with Steed and Ed, I do think this episode does a great job of showing us these contrasting differences between the two characters. Of course, it's very obvious from the start of the show that Steed and Ed are very different people, with how they grew up, with their background, with how they captain ships, so on and so forth. But in the previous episode, I do think it really highlighted the parts in which Steed and Ed are actually pretty similar. They both have felt or feel stuck or trapped. They both are in this pursuit of trying to find something new. They both also enjoy nice things, and we see how, even though Ed is all decked out in leather and everything, he likes nice, soft, fine fabrics, and Steed is very much encouraging in that as well. And they both very much match each other's energy in terms of just how chaotic and insane they can be in their own respective ways. And we also see how Ed embraces Steed and Steed's things, and how fascinated he is by him. And we very much see Steed as he welcomes Ed and allows and supports him to enjoy the fine things that he likes, and even, I think, opens himself up in terms of like showing him something that I don't think the rest of the crew even knows about, being the auxiliary. I'm not gonna get this word right, so just bear with me. With the auxiliary wardrobe, I fucked that up so bad, but you know what I meant. With him showing this very special thing that he has that he doesn't share with anything else that has all of his wonderful clothing in it. In comparison to that last episode where it highlighted their similarities, this episode, it very much highlighted more the differences between the two of them, beyond the things that we kind of already knew, at least. And we see this from the very start of the episode, where Ed is teaching Steed how to be a pirate, or how to enhance his pirating skills. And we see how Ed, and how he captains, and how he goes about being a pirate, I suppose you could say, is that it is much more of a forceful and blunt approach. Very much a way you would expect a pirate to go about doing what they do. Whereas Steed, we do see him take a more hesitant or gentler type approach when it comes to his pirating. And it very much shows the very different lives that they've led. Ed has been a pirate for majority of his life, and Steed, he grew up much more in this very passive-aggressive atmosphere and with those type of people. And so, of course, how they go about navigating their way through conflict or with intimidation tactics, it goes very differently, and very much in those differences between a more upfront aggressiveness and a passive aggressiveness. And in the context of the show, neither of them is really right or wrong in the ways that they do it, and it's much more of a, well, going about it this way makes more sense for this situation, whereas going about it this way makes more sense for this situation. And we very much see it in this episode and in other episodes where this really does play to each other's strengths, and that there is a time and place for both, and they both, to an extent, also kind of learn from each other. We very much see Steed later on in the final episode, him kind of more taking that very upfront aggressive approach very briefly while he's intoxicated, which I know we're like jumping way ahead, but we very much see how Steed takes some of the things that he learns and applies it later down the line. And also the same can be said for Ed, him briefly before Izzy gets involved and really makes things 10 times worse. But when he very much tries to take this approach of like, okay, what if I just, let's just talk about it, or like sing about it, and take a more gentler approach to things than he maybe would have before. But again, going back to them playing to each other's strengths, we see it very much in the beginning of this episode with the opener, how it is much more playing towards Ed's strengths when they are raiding the ship and attacking the ship, and how obviously his route makes much more sense in terms of going about these things. Whereas we see later on at the party, Steed takes the helm of it, and going about it his way also causes, I think, the same amount of damage. It's just going a different route, and it plays towards his own strengths. Also see them sticking to the deal they made in the past episode where Ed was like, hey, maybe I can teach you a thing or two about being a pirate, and in return you can teach me a thing or two about being a gentleman. We see them both learning from each other, and neither of them really doing a great job. When Steed, Ed, Olawande, and Frenchie go off to the fancy party, we see what kind of antics the crew gets up to while they are away. And by antics, I do mean Lucius and Pete. And Izzy catching them in their antics, and the wonderfully improvised scene that we get by Con O'Neill. And with Ed and Steed being away at the party, Izzy utilizes the power that he has in this situation, and does go about disciplining Lucius and causing a bit of a rivalry and a bit of friction between the two characters. I think it's very fun about this episode is the fact that the B-plot is this time focused on Lucius, just from a storytelling perspective of just getting to see a different plot line with Lucius specifically, and getting to see him and learn more about him, and to see him starting to develop a little relationship there, too. Not only that, but getting the funny little tiff that is happening between him and Izzy, and him also kind of winning at the end of the day, with him, of course, just getting all the tea that he can from Fang, and just using that against Izzy, which was just absolutely hilarious. We also have another plot happening back on the party ship with Olu and Frenchie, and with them pulling off this excellent pyramid scheme, which I again, hilarious. This episode, just hilarious. But the fact that they took something that is much more of a more modern day thing, like a pyramid scheme, and altering it and putting a twist on it to make it sort of fit and theoretically work for something that could happen in the 1700s. Which also, this is like the perfect show to do that too, with all the historical inaccuracies that they're just like, let's just throw a pyramid scheme into it. Make it really fun. Also, it's just very much giving eat the rich and also fuck you and fuck your racism all mixed into one, and it is such a wonderful thing to watch all these just horrible bottom of the barrel type of people who are honestly like scum of the earth and super stupid, just watching them all get schemed and and stolen from, on top of Steed then coming in later on and making them all turn against each other and practically burn down their own ship. All of that was just extremely satisfying to watch. And speaking of Steed getting involved, and as we get towards the end of this episode, it does speak to his character, I think in many different ways, in terms of how he reacts when other people are being mean or bullying or just being like absolutely horrible to him, and his general reaction is to kind of just remove himself from the situation. But say anything or do anything to hurt somebody that he cares about, and he's going to make your life a living hell, and it is absolutely wonderful, and it's such a very interesting thing to see with his character. And we also see with Ed this very vulnerable thing that happens with him, and I think him just being very triggered by his past, how people are treating him at the party, and him suddenly coming to that realization that people are just being passive aggressive towards him and being the absolute worst and trying to make him the joke of the party and all that disgusting behavior. And you obviously can't help but to feel for him in those kind of moments. I also just really appreciate the fact that we never had this "I told you so" moment from Steed, or a "oh well, I tried to warn you." Like there was none of that happened, and it very much more was Steed taking Ed's emotions into consideration at that moment, knowing, well, I'm not going to tell you I told you so. You're obviously just very hurt and very affected by whatever just happened in there, and instead really just takes the situation to his own hands and is like, you know what, these are my people, let me deal with it. And with us following the chaos that breaks out on the party ship, and Steed basically making everyone burn that ship down, and following that we get this really beautifully moonlit scene that happens just between Steed and Ed. I think it just captures the beauty and innocence of their relationship, and how genuine that relationship is. And this is kind of like a sidebar, but I promise it kind of connects into all of this too. And this is strictly my own opinion, and it's not something that I think has been talked about by the writers or the actors, and I'm fairly certain they would have their own opinions and probably different opinions than my own, but I also would love to hear what they have to say on this topic. But I really do think when it comes to Ed, we are watching him continuously fall in love with Steed, and it very quickly goes from fascination to infatuation to love, in terms of Ed's feelings for Steed. And I think it's something that's very new and very different for Ed, and this idea of falling in love with someone, and this actual feeling of being in love with someone. It's a very new sort of thing for him that he's never really gotten to experience or allow himself to experience before. And it very much is a similarity, and very much something that can be said for Steed as well. But I also feel like with Steed, he does have a very different journey with love and with his understanding of love. And this is a very personal interpretation and headcanon for Steed, but I do very much see him as demisexual, and that's also probably partially me projecting onto his character, but in a way, I think Steed kind of helped me identify that within myself and understand that about myself, because I saw very similar qualities that I have with him in those ways. Something that we watch with him, that he does not fully register his feelings and emotions towards Ed, and not only that, but he doesn't register Ed's own feelings and emotions towards him. He is very oblivious to both of those, to both his own emotions and to Ed's, because I honestly, when you're watching this as an onlooker, Ed doesn't really hide it all too much. He's pretty obvious for the most part that, you know, he has some feelings for Steed. He likes Steed. Like, that is fairly obvious. And it's so funny watching, because like, it's something, again, I can very much relate to Steed, and it's something I project a bit onto Steed as well. But like, from my own perspective, from me watching this show, yeah, it's very obvious. I know from like personal experience that kind of stuff also goes like right over my head. I don't register it right away. It takes me a while, and then takes me a while to come to the conclusion about what my potential feelings could be for someone and what that means. So it's very much something I identify and recognize with Steed, and when watching it, it takes him a while, and I get it. I really do. And the funny thing, but also like slightly sad thing is that from Ed's perspective, he thinks that like they're on the same like wavelength. They're like, he's like, oh yeah, no, this guy's definitely feeling the same thing that I'm feeling. We're both here about this. And that's not the case. Like, in theory, yes, like Steed's there, he just doesn't realize he's there. And doesn't recognize that until later on. While Ed's like, yeah, no, I think he's reciprocating the same feelings as I am. And of course, we don't know anything about season 2 yet, or what's gonna happen, or the conversations that could transpire. But I just can only imagine the kind of conversation that Steed and Ed could potentially have, where Steed is like explaining to Ed, being like, I'm in love with you, and I've been in love with you for a while now. I just didn't realize that what I was feeling was love. Like, I didn't know I was in love with you. I definitely was. I just did not know how to identify that emotion. And meanwhile, Ed's like, what? I really hope they have that conversation. I think it'd be funny. But going back to the specific scene itself in episode 5, to kind of tag along the thing that I swear ties in with all of that, but I think this is one of those moments we do see Ed falling in love with Steed just a little bit more, and falling in love with another part of him, and another part of who he is. And it overall is just such a beautiful and gentle scene between the two of them. And that almost kiss that happens, and the fact that they are just so close and yet so far. And I said this while doing my rewatch, but this was the scene and the moment where it really solidified my confidence in Gentlebeard being a thing, that these two were falling in love and were going to fall in love and be with each other, and that it would eventually happen. Overall, this episode, again, it's just another fantastic episode in this show. I think all the different plot lines that were happening held their own ground, too. I love this episode giving us new and different dynamics between the characters, too, with us getting introduced to that Lucius and Pete relationship that happens, but also specifically getting to see Olawande and Frenchie together and them pulling off that pyramid scheme, which, again, just absolutely hilarious and just so satisfying to watch. If you couldn't tell already, I absolutely just love the continuous building of Steed and Ed's relationship. Oh, and to my dear, dear Dizzy Izzy, stay mad, bestie. I believe that is it for today's deep dive. Thank you so much for watching, and of course, do not forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell, and to also like this video, and also feel free to leave a comment down below if I said anything that maybe might spark a bit of a conversation to be had. If you want to give me your own thoughts and opinions, I would love to hear them. Also, feel free to follow me on my other social medias as well, and also check out my other videos. I have reacted to Our Flag Means Death episode 1 through 5 so far, and I've also done deep dives on all those episodes too. But I believe that's it, so again, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye! Auxiliary. Oh no. Auxiliary. With the auxiliary, oh god. Auxiliary,